Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's BAInsights. Got three excellent guests already busy, excitedly waiting for the session. I hope you are too. Topic today, we're going to be talking about BA hints and tips. We're going to be sharing them. Three excellent guests who will introduce themselves briefly, and then we'll go into the session. But if anyone's got any comments of their own hints and tips you want to share, please do. And also the like and button is always helpful, as is the subscribe one as well. But let's dig in with some introductions, and we'll start with you, Matt, first, if you could, please.
Hi, I'm Matt Sutherland-Patman. I've been a BA for just over 11 years. I'm currently the head of profession for business analysis at the Cabinet Office, which is central government for the UK. I lead a large team of BAs and the function within the department. There's a lot of programs and products that are happening at the moment. Looking forward to contributing to this discussion point.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Matt. And Karen?
Hi, thanks for inviting me, John. My name's Karen Newnham. I'm a principal business analyst currently in the UK government, and I was trying to work it out. I think I've been a BA for more than 25 years.
Excellent, super. And then last but not least, Bronia.
Hi, Bronia Anderson. Oh, I'm mute. No. Hi, Bronia Anderson Kelly. I've been a BA for about 13 years, longer in IT change. I'm a consultant BA in the offshore, primarily in the offshore finance sector, so a little bit of history in government as well. And I've also, for about a year now, been the IIBA UK's tech director as well.
Super. Thank you very much, Bronia. I'm not going to do the maths, but it seems like we've got a decent amount of years between us from an experience perspective. So I'm sure we come up with some interesting hints and tips for BAs anyway. Well, let's start maybe with Matt first in terms of what's the best way you found to quickly understand a new domain, new industry, even a new organisation you work
in? So I've worked in various different industries and different sectors. The way that UK government works is slightly different because the domain is usually a product or a service. So the service is typically either internal, so it's just for civil servants, or you have an external, which is for the general public. So that does also include civil servants as a user. So most of the time it's on an established service. So one that either needs updating, remodeling, or just needs kind of some maintenance to keep the lights on. Usually for a new product for me is that we look to require a slightly different approach, as I mentioned, and that includes discovery work, user research, and validation. So for existing services, though, I generally start with kind of viewing the documented process, do a lot of shadowing, identifying any variances, shortcuts that users are partaking in, and generally then question the why. Is it a better process than the documented one? Is it quicker? Is it more reliable? And then kind of study who's doing what. Start building process maps and that sort of thing, identify bottlenecks, kind of seeing what the problems are encountering and such forth. Start then looking at potential solutions that may be able to then implement. It's only at the point of fully identifying what the problems are do we then start looking at those problems. But one thing to always remember is look at upstream and downstream. So if you're looking to make any change, always consider what's going to happen to any of the processes that follow on from what you're looking at, and then anything that's feeding into what you're focusing, so what your area is, because that's going to incur potentially some change requests and business change to ensure that what you're going to do isn't going to mess up other practices and other processes. So that's generally what I'll do, is just try to understand what the lay of the land is currently and then go from there.
Excellent. Thanks, man. There's an interesting point when you say that sometimes the operating procedures or documentation doesn't always match what you see on the process flow. But it's nice to be in an environment where you at least have those to look at.
Yeah.
Karen, what would be your perspective on that same question?
Well, I've moved many times. I've never turned up anywhere kind of being already a SME in that domain. So I've used, the internet quite a lot. Nowadays, I would probably use Gen AI, Copilot, or whatever, to understand the general domain. I think you can ask a lot of questions around generally what that domain's about. It may be something, a prompt like, tell me like a 12-year-old, those kind of prompts, and then you can dig into the specific enterprise that you're going to work with. And a lot of stuff is public sector, even for private companies, so you can get a good head start then. But then there's always what happens when you get in the job is there'll be all these weird terms that you won't understand. So I go and look for a glossary of terms, find that. And then in every meeting, I write down the words that I don't know. And then I find someone friendly to go and tell me what those are. And I keep a record of them. And then I listen for them again and go, okay, did I get the context? And I think the final thing I probably do quite a lot is to kind of hunt down the person who's got a history of, someone that's been around a long time who knows, knows the history of the particular piece of work you've been working on, because that's valuable, right? So you can ask them about the terms, but what you can ask them about as well is what was happening before. So what project came before this? What people came before this? Keep them on side. I quite often find those in my BA teams, which is really helpful. So that's what I would do.
Excellent. Definitely resonated with me, Karen. And Bronia.
Loads of similar points in there for sure. Karen's AI and Matt asking the why. I think because I've spent kind of probably all of my BA career, most of my IT change career moving between organizations and projects, life assurance, wealth management, government, strategic, legal, automation, loads of different things. I'm always landing in a new domain, a new place, a new industry. So one of the things is you have to kind of get good at landing fast. So you have kind of a couple of weeks to kind of appear or become like you've been there for years. So for me, it starts out with context, really. I need to understand why the work exists, who and what's driving it, who's commissioning it, what the problem really is. That goes back to Matt's why statement, and what we're really trying to solve. And once you've got that like as an anchor, then work outward from there. So mixing up curiosity with structure, with people watching, and mostly I'll do that through like stakeholder conversations and collaborative workshops, probably more than Matt's suggested shadowing, probably a little bit more than that actually, but that might just be the types of projects that I've worked on more than anything. But I also read and research myself a lot before I utilize people time, especially expensive people time. So I will do, as Karen said, a bit of stuff now with AI, but historically it would be things like internally reading documentation that you've got there, of course, right? But externally, you might be reading about the regulations that organization and industry operates in. I've worked with government on a land and deeds project, and I spent time, first of all, reading the legislation. It was rather dry, but it actually came in really handy and found things that we needed, constraints and things we needed to do within the project. So that was really useful. And don't be afraid to ask stupid questions. Karen's thing about acronyms there, ask that. It should be absolutely fine to go and ask that. If you don't know it, chances are somebody else will as well.
Yeah, and that's that. And the sort of advice doesn't just apply when you're new to a domain. It's just continue asking questions where you don't know the answer, which seems obvious, but there's normally plenty of people sitting in workshops or meetings who don't always know the answers, and they're a little bit quiet. And it's often down to the BA to ask the question of what does that mean? Why do you do that? Who's this person? So it totally resonated. As did the point as well around process, because for me that's a really good way for me to understand the type of roles that are involved in the organisation, what it is they're doing, what objectives they have, type of deliverables. And therefore, when I start to hear about their needs and their issues or experiences, it's anchored in me having some knowledge of what it is they're doing.
Right.
And what's interesting is that, I guess unless we're working on a really crazy domain, there's normally things that are quite relatable, because if you're working in a bank, you can have a bank account, you take a mortgage out, or if you're in healthcare, you obviously using medicine at some point, so you might have an appreciation of what it is. There's normally some anchor that you can find.
Personal experience,
domain. Yeah, that's right. And I think using that is helpful, on top of all the excellent tips that you added as well. I'm going to start next week with Karen in terms of, is there what's the best tip or what's an excellent tip you've received from a mentor or colleague, Karen?
So I'm probably going to echo something we've been saying in that last question quite a lot, but it was something that really stuck with me. Probably about 15 years ago when I was with a really good kind of analyst programmer, I think he was called back in the day. And it was that ability to say you don't know, rather than trying to kind of get round something. Now, there is a way of doing that. So don't use it because you kind of haven't planned or prepped for a meeting, because that's just not going to make you look professional. But if you're genuinely put in a situation where you've been asked for something, say, I don't know, I'm going to take that away and I'll come back to you. When's a good time to come back, and who would be maybe a good person to contact about this if you've got any contacts, and do it like that. Don't expect that you have to know all the answers in every meeting.
Yeah, excellent advice. Bronia?
Well, I'm glad I had a bit of a heads up on this question, because it's one of those where you have to get, there's so many things, isn't there, that kind of shape your history. I narrowed it down to 5, but I might not share all 5 with you on tips. I mean, there's Adrian Reed, when he came over to the Isle of Man, we brought him over and he did a presentation here. And he talks about this a lot, and that is stripping stuff back and finding out the real problem, which is what, again, Matt was talking about before. That's an absolute classic. If you're not doing that already, then you need to be doing that. There's a local business analyst, I'll name her, Portia Smith here. She can have a name check, who told me a mantra once: no one's going to die. And it probably translates to a lot of life, but actually there's a thing around chasing perfection. And also when you need to appropriately do that in projects, because a lot of us aren't working on projects, in healthcare or in defense or something. We're working on, projects that don't have people's lives in their hand. But it applies even to kind of the little tasks and stuff. And there's a little bit of balancing our activities and what's absolutely necessary and what's not, and putting the best things into the best places and not burning ourselves in the process. One that I heard just this last week or so on which I think is wonderful, so I want to share it, was Scott Colfer from Herd Consulting did an AI week talk this week, and he said, if you can see the whole board, you can play a better game. And it was that good. I've written it in the front of a notebook. And I just think it's really a good reminder to keep zooming out and to look at the bigger picture and look at who all the players are, and to really keep and to have how everything that connects, and just keep that, especially when you're digging in details, is to do that. One of them was a BA manager. It wasn't anything he said, it was just the way he was. And that was that he was kind of like a swan. Like, he was calm and graceful on the top, and there was all this work and turbulence going underneath, and he just protected his team from it. And I really, I aspire to be like that, if that makes sense, so that I would that I can be doing things and protect other people around me from any kind of chaos that might be going on in a project. And the last one was a CEO once told me, don't just bring problems, bring solutions. And I don't completely agree, because you do want people to bring you to surface problems even when they don't know the best way forwards, but just thinking ahead and looking at options, offering options for mitigations, and being constructive, not just reactive. So there's a whole element around that. So I went to town on that one, so apologies, but there's a few there.
No, not at all. Not at all. You've raised the bar a little bit, Bronia, but no problem.
5. Matt, can you do 6?
That's it. Over to you, man.
You've taken all of the ones I've written down.
Oh, was it? Okay, sorry.
Just focus on the something I mentioned already. It's focusing on the problem, not the solution. Is making sure that you're asking the right questions. You've got to understand the root cause. So a great BA will question if that's the right problem that we're trying to solve. It's you work with a lot of people and a lot of stakeholders, and they generally come to you with I've got this thing I want you to do. And they've not necessarily considered what the root problem is, or the root cause of what the actual thing is that they're trying to trying to get you to do. So you end up creating something, or they're asking you to create something that either provides you with a sticky plaster, which sometimes will work, especially if it's governance that needs to be implemented quickly. But it just could potentially cause you problems further down. So you need to understand what that root problem is. Something Vaughan Luckman mentioned at the recent conference was that there's doing things right and there's doing the right things. And we sit kind of in the middle of where that is. So you need to consider, where are we adding value? Will we look back in 6 months, a year's time, whenever it may be, and actually celebrate what we've and consider what we've done a success? As I mentioned, is it the root cause that we're trying to resolve? And then something I mentioned just before now is look up or downstream. There will be impacts to what we're going to be implementing. Do we need to consider that changes need to be made there as well? So there's a couple of things there to think about. I think that we need to consider, and that's probably the best thing that I've been told.
Excellent. Well, taking a couple of that were on my list as well, the three of you, but there was a few extras, so I will share theirs at least. I think one of them that resonates most was about pitching to the person who was least likely to understand as well. So just making sure that, when we document something, think about what's obvious, put yourself in the shoes of the person who's going to read it, but actually the person that's probably not the closest to the domain, not the expert, maybe the developer. So that was pretty useful guidance, which I try to look back on quite often. And I guess a little bit similar to what Matt was saying, but around the solution. So it's sort of like challenge the solution and don't just start with a solution. And often stakeholders might start with a solution, so I have to challenge to go back to understand, that root cause, as Matt put it, and the why, I think, as one of you also put it as well. If you can get back to that point, it's really solid footings as well. And actually, one other thing just occurs to me is that, as a consultant, I'm not always joining projects at the start. So sometimes there's some analysis that's been done beforehand. And I think probably a couple of tips relating to that. One would be make sure you look for that, what's been done before. And probably secondly, critique it. Don't just assume it's correct. It can come back to bite you. I don't know where they come from, but definitely things that occurs to me.
So that's a really interesting point, because sometimes there's a reason why there's been analysis done beforehand and it's not been implemented. So understanding the reason why it's not been implemented, or why a project has been closed down and then respun up a year or two later, is understanding why it didn't get done or why it wasn't implemented at that time, will help you in the future for understanding, well, what path do we need to take? What other considerations do we need to have?
That's it. Should at least hopefully prevent you making some of the mistakes that might have been done before.
Yeah.
Bronia, can you share a BA tip for ensuring that your analysis is comprehensive and the quality of your outcomes is as good as it can be?
I'm only chuckling because I'm like, do I need to do 5 again?
Well, you don't need to do 5. You don't
No,
need to do 6. You don't need to beat yourself.
No, don't worry. So comprehensive and quality analysis. Okay. I guess for me, it's probably not about like having the most detailed document or the output. It's probably about getting the right people engaged with the content, with what you're doing with the analysis. So instead of sending out to say like 20 stakeholders and hoping for some magic or something, I'll be quite selective, getting the people who really know their stuff involved, and then walking through it with them. You don't always assume that people have got the opportunity to read those things, or that they're going to do those things thoroughly. So and as well, I often will point out the sections that I want people maybe to really focus on. So if I've got things like, say, formulae in there that I need to check that that's going to work, or that that's going to fit every case, then I might say in some industries, our actuarial or our finance department, this is the bit I really want you to focus on. The whole document is for your review, but I need you to give me a yes on this section and actually give them the section number. And that works really well because they know they've got a thing that they're kind of going to be responsible for. Saves everybody time, and you're getting meaningful feedback that way. And also call out where you're not certain on things. Don't present the whole thing as I've nailed the whole thing. You might say, this particular section, I'm not sure this is going to hold up in edge cases. So could you have a little think about that bit when you go through it? Even, if I'm looking at, so say, an outcome of what I'm working on means I've got to have a legal agreement put in place with third parties or something. It's things like that. Is this process going to fit with that? Can you have an extra think about that? And as well, asking broader questions when you're doing the gathering. Make sure you ask, if you might be asking those detailed questions when you're analysing, zooming in and looking really close, but make sure with every stakeholder you're asking broad enough questions. Is there anything else? Is there anybody else that I need to talk to? Is there anything that might be relevant that I haven't asked you already? Those are the things that give people the opportunity to give you something that you haven't thought about, to close those unknown unknowns kind of thing. I think they're quite useful.
Yeah, I think the broader questions, I think, is an excellent point, because you want your stakeholders to feel comfortable sort of exploring all that they know and all that's on their mind.
Yeah.
There'd be nothing more frustrating than giving them a question that doesn't give them the room to really tell you what they need from you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an excellent one. Matt?
This was quite a difficult one, really, in a way, just to ensure, because there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of people that you can speak to. So, and that's kind of the basis of my response, is that the best way I've found to ensure it's comprehensive and or it's got quality involved is that you're validating, and you're not just using one source of truth, and you're not taking it kind of at that face value. So I look to compare a couple of different things. So what stakeholders say, whether it be in workshops or interviews or any engagements that you're having with them. You're looking at the data, you're looking at the process, and you're looking at how it works in practice. So if all kind of like 2 or 3 different stories line up, you're starting at least on some solid ground. And then you can kind of build from there. So you're talking here end-to-end thinking for identifying issues, talking to people on the front line, so that'd be end users, getting user researchers involved, doing some service design to draw up some prototypes to support your thinking and your potential solutions. You're kind of building those relationships and you're getting that trust. So therefore that in itself then draws out more reliable information, because people will trust you. They'll provide you with truth of what's going on, rather than, oh yeah, we're meant to do it like this. And then the most important is to verify it. Once you've got an understanding, you've got that awareness of what you've got, is that you create something, a visual, user stories, artifacts in some manner, your version of what they've created, so that you're kind of verifying it. And then you get that comprehensive agreement that, yes, I understood it and that it's accurate. And then before signing it off, I'd do a quick kind of sense check in myself, so what? Why is it make a difference? What's going on here? And if I can't explain why it matters to the business or to the customer, then it probably doesn't ring true or doesn't belong there. So it's kind of a couple of different factors there. As you get verifying the data, and understanding, and you use multiple sources in which to do that with.
Yeah, excellent. I like the way as well, Matt, that you included in that yourself as that source, to be critical and to think about what it is you're putting down, and to ask the right questions of yourself as well.
Yeah.
And Karen.
Yeah, I think the term quality is quite a difficult one for BAs to navigate, especially new BAs. So I'm going to talk to new BAs, I guess, and say that at the beginning it's quite difficult to know what the level of quality, how far you need to go with that analysis, and that does come over time. So I use an analogy of when you're first doing that kind of understanding the problem space, that it's a bit like, I've never been on an archaeological dig, but when you watch those programs on Channel 4, there's usually like a broad space they want to navigate, and they start kind of doing like little test digs, and then they figure out where they want to kind of focus in on. And you can sometimes, you do that with a BA as a BA as well with your analysis, but sometimes you can end up going too deep down one place where you're maybe not broad enough. And again, that comes with time. So if you're a new BA, I would say or even if you're kind of still, anything you're kind of new in on, you need to understand that that's an iterative process, and you need to be checking in and verifying. So I liked Matt's point about verifying. I would be drawing those pictures and regularly verifying what have I missed, back to Bronia's point as well. What is not on here? What do we need to add in, and get that peer reviewed with people in your team, and also take it around the stakeholders who need to be part of these conversations, and just build into the fact that I think that's the biggest mistake I think new BAs make, is that they think that that's like a one and done activity. You're going to go round quite a few times, and you're going to go down a few holes that perhaps you shouldn't have gone down. And especially if you've got a team with like senior BAs and people with a bit more experience, maybe not even BAs, maybe product owners or maybe service designers, they're also going to help you you can check in and go, do you think we need to go further down here? Maybe not, and you can recalibrate. So it's that iterative quality, it's that verification, and it's that kind of asking, what have I missed? What have I missed? I think I've just brought together everything that everyone else said.
It's funny, isn't it? Because we've all mentioned like missing stuff and not seeing the whole picture as a definition of what quality is, and that's probably where we think, maybe we've tripped over in our history, or where we think our value is now, is that we uncover all those extra bits and pieces, as opposed to writing up the things well as being a quality outcome. So that's probably a key note, is just the differentiation. We're defining quality as making sure you've covered the whole landscape and understood the whole thing, as opposed to the things well, you've written them up really well.
I think that's because that's the one that people are more likely to fall into the problem, and also because quality isn't defined at the beginning. So I kind of quite often see when project managers are talking about time, cost, and quality, I see the quality being the BA's domain more than perhaps the project manager. And I think that's a negotiation. So it's not the map's not drawn for you, is it?
No,
and
right.
You could end up being in areas that you don't need to be in. So of course you've got to investigate them, but there's that knowing when to pull back as well. But of course, yes, you've also got to have like all your general kind of stuff there, and reiterating that's important too, right?
Yeah, I think sometimes with quality, there's always a correlation between value as well. You can start to think about, what's the value of doing this, or what's the value if we don't do this, and that can sometimes lead to you to think about, ultimately to the quality of the analysis. But there's certainly questions that I would tend to ask. I think as well, touching on the point that Bronia made, I think it's important to try and identify sources so that you're not always relying on what your experience is, or asking the questions you've had success before. So what I tend to do as an example is I will often speak to the development team and the architects pretty much before I speak to the business, and find out, what questions do they want me to ask, what has worked well, what hasn't worked well, what do they find is a pain, for example. They're all things that I can try and help with when I get into the analysis. And then probably another tip that somewhat relates to that, probably at the other end, in terms of comprehensive quality, and it does relate to what Matt said a little while ago as well, in that if you're going to rely on people to review your work, and you want them to review regularly, you need to don't drown them in the most boring, mundane document you can find. Try and make it engaging, interesting. Use colours to highlight where they might need to go. As Bronia said as well, it doesn't hurt for you to guide stakeholders of where specifically you want them to look. They're all tips that can get them on your side and make them, hopefully use their time efficiently, so you can ask them another question later. They won't push you away. But I feel like we've covered a load on that one. So with that in mind, is there perhaps Matt, I'll ask you this one first. Whether there is a number one tip that you would always share with new analysts?
I think it's been slightly touched on already, but I think that I think the best way to kind of advise a brand new BA, or someone that's like Karen said, someone who's new to a domain, there is, you don't have to have all of the answers. You just focus on asking the right questions. So being a BA isn't about being the expert in the room. It's about being the one who can help others think clearly and provide the outcomes through curiosity, not certainty, as a quick quote there. So it's filling the room with those people who can help you. Bring in the developers, bring in the experts, bring in the subject matter, the stakeholders, those people around you who will have the answers. They'll help you with the user stories. They'll help you understand the domain. They'll help you understand the background, the context. They'll help you generate a solution, because we're not going to come up with the solutions. We're going to need people around us to do that. So you don't need to know everything. You just need to be able to facilitate and ask the right questions in order to get those answers.
That's it. Yeah. And I guess that point as well, you don't even have to know all the right questions, because you can ask others what the right questions are, or just observe other BAs and think, actually, that's a good question. I'm going to use that myself next time around. Oh, excellent start, Matt. Karen.
I've got 3 things, not 5. Sorry, and I can't do 6, but I think I've got 3. I'm going to forget one as I put it, though. So the first thing, because this is about new BAs, I think the first one I wanted to share was a fairly recent one that I'd heard. So it's always felt a little bit clunky when people say, I want to ask a stupid question because I'm new. And I think Bronia mentioned that. And I think it's fine to ask stupid questions, but I don't think it's good. It doesn't make you look professional if you signpost it as a stupid question. So I would say something like, okay, can I play that back to you? Or I'm missing X. Can we just kind of ask a little bit more and dig into that? So that's the first thing I would say, is kind of think about how you're going to position that question. The second thing I would say is, and this depends, it doesn't matter if it's a project or a product or whatever, what kind of team you're in, there's usually governance there. And I don't think new BAs use the governance as much as they could do. So rather than, getting all tied up in maybe there's a load of risks, get them put on the risk log. If you've got some assumptions, get them in there. If you need to raise things because you're not sure about where you need to go, and you need to get guidance, or you need to get a view back from the sponsor, then use the governance to do that. I think there's a lot of kind of, I'm getting stuck in this bit, I don't know what to do. If that's the case, come back to the project manager and speak to them and say, like, where am I going to go with this? Or the product owner or whatever. Use that governance process. And the third thing, because we were talking, I think Matt said about questions, was it actually occurred to me that as well, again, another kind of sign, I don't like to sign Gen AI out a lot, but that's probably a good place to test your questions now, in terms of, I would always have the catch-all question, like Bronia said, about, is there anything else I've missed? Is there anything else, like, but I think you could very much use Copilot or similar to set out a question plan. Just make sure you've got enough kind of space in there to move around and be a bit agile with a small a if you need to be. You're not too rigid in that question pack.
Yeah, at least maybe using Copilot or GBT or Gemini, even if it helps you reframe a question in a way you feel a bit more comfortable asking. I think it's excellent advice, Karen, you said. Bronia.
So my only contribution to this section, I think, is something we've not touched on at all. And that is for new BAs. The biggest thing I've come across when I've had just random people hitting me up and I've ended up on calls or a coffee or something like that, is people's confidence when they're new. And because BAs have to be a trusted advisor and represent their stakeholder, there's a level of confidence that you kind of need to bring, even if you're a junior and you're permanently employed and that sort of thing. You still are representing them, and you have to kind of enthuse that confidence into your stakeholders. For me as a contractor, I have to bring it day one interview. You have to be presenting that you're confident and you can do this and you can figure this out and you can understand this domain you've never worked in before. And it isn't a fake it till you make it. I'm not saying to people, fake it till you make it. There probably is a place for that in certain elements, but it's more when I'm speaking to new or aspiring BAs, it's around looking at the skills and abilities that they already have that are BA skills and abilities, and reminding them of those and saying you actually have those capabilities. If someone has already landed a BA role, it's a competitive market, isn't it, right? Even especially in the last year or two. If you've got a BA role already, someone has seen that you're relatively new, someone's seen the potential in you, and has seen those skills and abilities. You can take confidence from that. You can analyze yourself and look at what is it? What are the skills and abilities that I have that I've got from other parts of life, from the role that I had before, from my education that I've had? How have I been using those? And whether it's you're good at asking questions, whether it's you organize, whether you're good at spotting patterns, understanding context, all those things can have been used elsewhere in your life before this new role, if you like. So the rest of the stuff, the techniques and models and frameworks, all of those things, they are learned and as you go along, and you do need them, and you can do training. But also you can get support from your fellow BAs in the team, from other people that have been through and even worked with BAs before. You can get those. But being able to show up to whatever you're BAing with that confidence, it helps people trust you and you can represent them and makes you really effective early on. So go and find some of that confidence, go and dig into the abilities that you have and feel confident about it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think therefore, I mean, something that resonates with me in that respect is that, it's often quite hard to learn, be involved in an environment where you're trying to learn a domain, you're trying to meet new stakeholders, learn the topics, the products. So on top of all of that, you don't want to try and pretend you're something you're not, or be pretending that you know more than you do, but in your domain. So I think it's important for BAs to know they can be themselves. Therefore, they'll be more genuine. They'll be more natural. It'll be easier for them to resonate with people. And I think, just going back to a point we made earlier around domain, I think, don't forget about your BA skills. You're not in front of a stakeholder because you are the only expert in your domain or on a product. You are there to try and bring some structure and some ideas and some techniques together. And you probably know those. So if you can bring those, that's almost certainly what others around the table won't have. And then build on that, And there's certainly things that we'll all be expert in to a degree, I think. But even then, I try to push them in my back pocket and pretend I'm not an expert anymore. I had no expertise in it because I don't want to get into that position where I'm telling people what the answer is. I want them to tell me what their answer is, because it will quite often be different than what I think it is as well. All right. So I wonder if there's Bronia, is there a BA shortcut that you've discovered that saves time for you time and again?
I mean, like, there's a bit more restriction, I think, from the contract world having stuff that you maybe use again, or templates or tools or something like that. I think it's more, my shortcut is adapting fast to what's already works there. So every organization has its own shortcuts, its own templates and processes, approval gates, whatever ways of engaging, whatever they are. But my trick really is to find those things quickly within an organization. So rather than reinventing the wheel yourself, and also maybe that can be quite disruptive for stakeholders if they're engaged in a different way. If a bunch of contractors come in and they all start behaving differently than what they're used to engaging with the project team, that can be quite disruptive for stakeholders because the expectations are changing all the time. So if you're introducing a whole new way of doing things, that's kind of problematic. I mean, you have to be mindful of things that you can see that might not work or that you could improve on and that sort of thing. But generally, trying to understand what's there and what works well and the shortcuts that already exist, using those, it kind of saves you time than having to reinvent it yourself. But I do also, going back to AI here, Karen, do also use AI a lot for things like, I might go into an organization that either is less mature with things like templates and ways of working, or they're wanting me to do something that's quite different from the standard stuff. So like they might be doing something in the strategic space or a discovery type document, or something that's not like an investigation, but doesn't really have the same outcomes as a business case or something like that, I might have to come up with something new. And in that case, I might use like AI to help me formulate what needs to be within that document and how to kind of best build it so that it reads well and tells stories properly. I suppose a specific tip might be when I'm doing the research stage, the early on bit we said before about reading and looking around the context. One thing I do, this is a really specific tip, is I save all of my research like in a research folder, and I usually name things like this is what this is, and then I'll put who I got it from and the date that I got it. And so that's a really specific tip, but it stood me in quite good stead for when I later go, where was that thing that I know that I don't know where I know that from? Because then I can go back and go, oh, it's from such body. That's who I got that off. And I can go back to them and I can see from the date where I received it and what the context was around it. Even if it's my own research, I'll save it where I've got it from. I'll take it out, but rather than bookmark, I'll actually take a copy of it and keep it. So that's quite a specific tip, saving you time later.
Excellent. And that relates as well to the response from the last question around, tips to new joiners. I think, something you said before
Very
about
specific
using
though, sorry, yeah.
guidance and documents from the organisation. I totally agree that if you can put forward documentation that they're familiar with, it gives you that a bit more credibility than if it's completely different.
Yeah.
Might be okay if it's completely different, perfect, but the likelihood is that's quite difficult. So quite difficult. Yeah. So excellent. Matt.
So I think a great time saver is this one's a little bit more project focused rather than an individual one. The great saver for me is to focus on the happy path first and then the exceptions second. So when you're documenting a user story or a process, BAs are often get immediately bogged down in all of the possible errors, edge cases, and all sorts of things, especially when you're in a workshop environment. Everyone's like, yeah, but this is the problem, and this is what's going to happen. Whereby if you just slow all of that down, because if you're in a workshop and you're just spending all of this time focusing on all of the edges, you're going to get exhausted, mental decay, all sorts of things like that, and you're going to end up not doing what you're there for. So first off, define that happy path. What is it? And then focus on that. So look at the single, perfect, ideal, whatever you want to call it, scenario where everything works and the user achieves their end goal. That gives you then the core value of what you're trying to achieve. Then make sure you time box, but you always leave yourself 15, 20 minutes, whatever, if it's an hour, time at the end to look at the exceptions. Make sure you've got that core established, and then you look at the exceptions. So you switch it, and then you go, what if this doesn't work? What happens when this occurs? And you start then questioning, and then you start to weed out what other things are going to happen. And then sometimes from there, you pick up where the actual problems are going to occur. And that's where you need to also then put your focus on, your attention on looking at how do we fix this? How do we bring about improved solutions, efficiencies, and such forth. So this approach for me ensures that you kind of capture that core logic, that core functionality very quickly, and then you handle that complexity, the difficult elements, a little bit more controlled and more focused way at the end. And then if you do run out of time, at least you've got that established process documented, agreed upon, and then you can come back later on and go, we didn't actually focus on this. And by the time that you're going back, they're thinking, he's coming up. He's bringing back to us understanding of the issues that we're experiencing, bringing to mind, then building that trust, building that relationship. Oh, we also need to focus on this. And it just kind of reestablishes your need to focus on the problems, the statements that they're encountering, where you do need to put your focus on, as well as just that core element. But you've got that core element out of the way.
Yeah, excellent advice there, Matt. I think as well, because it sort of stops you sapping all the energy with negativity right from the start. You can start off in a positive manner. It really helps you, and it probably helps the stakeholders as well. In fact, I'm confident it would. Excellent. I mean, I think Karen, anything for you to add?
Yeah, that's fine. I was liking what Matt was saying about the happy path piece, and it made me think that what I do as a shortcut quite early on, I never dictate to my teams kind of what modeling template or kind of method that they use, but I draw something quite early on based on that happy path. So I quite like user journeys, but that doesn't always work. So sometimes I might do a high level context diagram or a use case, but you're really talking, or maybe SIPOC, like supplier input, process output, customer. It'll depend on the context, right? But something quite high level that you literally kind of can go, oh, okay, I get this. I think there's a danger that people try and go straight into the detail. So that's a shortcut for me, and it helps you anchor. And I think it comes back to Matt's point about happy path. I always create a log, and nowadays I kind of have a template, even though I could probably build it from scratch quite quickly. And I do a lot, and it echoes what it's similar to Bronia's last tip. So it's a list of all the questions and what status they're in and who answered them and what the answer was. So I can at any given time go, well, what threads did I not follow up? What things do I need to go and pick up with this person? Who gave me that answer? And now I've gone back to it. Well, hang on, I need to know more about that answer. I need to go back to that person. And it usually has things in there like I number them. Like I said, I put status on there. I put who it was. I put a date. I put like the last time that it was kind of it was touched. So, the last updated value of it. It's quite easy to build. I stick it in Excel, but you could put it anywhere. And I also do that with slides. So the slide that comes, you probably do this in AI now, but the slide thing that I always have to do, it doesn't have to be on a slide, is create some sort of timeline. And every time I end up creating a timeline for something, maybe across a few swim lanes, I now kind of use the first few times I did it for, oh God, I'm going to have to create this all from scratch. And it's quite hard unless you're in a room and you can just draw it on a whiteboard. So I've got a slide that kind of allows me to do a quick version of a timeline. Again, you could do it in Miro, Mural, wherever you want to do it. But I have these things because I know I have to use them every time. The analysis log I use every time. Timelines I use 90% of the time. High level process, something like that. I would just recommend just hitting that as quickly as possible.
That's it.
I
Yeah,
have,
good to
Karen,
have that.
I similarly for a recent project have a spreadsheet, but it's probably less well set up. And when I onboarded another BA onto the project, I then shared the spreadsheet, and it's rather random. And she affectionately refers to it as the crazy spreadsheet because it's literally just got stuff.
Yeah, it
that
does
I've
end up with
thought
all
of and
your
asked.
notes, and it's not something that I would share as an artifact.
Yeah.
It's kind of the thing that you use.
Yeah,
And
no,
it's like
mine's
your
shared.
it's your working brain, isn't it? And kind of
Yeah.
manifest. So yeah.
It's quite interesting actually, because I mean, I do something similar. I tend to put my notes all over the artifacts that I'm working on. So it's like documents, process. I'll have it labeled. Like if I'm thinking, right, I need to answer that question next time, it'll all go on. It'll all
Yep.
go in red font, so it looks a bit unusual. When all the red disappears, then I know I've got everything covered. But I think it's quite nice the fact it looks a little bit messy at the start, because like as we go through it, because it just means that really people feel a bit more comfortable that they can share what they want to. They can share information, and we can put it on, build the picture as we go. I think as well. I think my other tip as well to shortcut some of your BA approaches relates to workshops. And I think sometimes there's nothing more daunting, particularly for someone as maybe new to business analysis, that they've got to host the workshop, bunch of stakeholders they've never met on a topic they're not really clear on, and do they really know whether they're asking the right questions? So that can be really difficult. My advice would be to firstly have at least a one-to-one with somebody in that room, so that you know a little bit about the topic, you've got a perspective, you know a little bit about some of the questions that might be worth asking, so that you're not going in completely cold. That might also give you the opportunity as well to consider whether the workshop's necessary, because there's a lot of times as a BA that my direction that I get given is set up a workshop without any real explanation as to why or the value of it. And definitely there are values to some, but there's loads of times where they're not valuable. So maybe having that one-to-one will allow us to tell whether the workshop would be a value if we extend it. So I think that's probably my tip. There's quite a few points we could cover, I'm sure. Hints and tips is such a broad topic, we could probably talk about it for hours. But as I did promise, we won't talk about it for hours. So I'm going to bring things to a nice natural close. So thank you, Karen, Bronia, Matt, for sharing your hints and tips. I know we just touched the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure there's plenty more to come, but I'm sure we've discussed as well, helped BAs, whether they're experienced or new. So on behalf of them, thank you very much. And yeah, just look forward to seeing you and hearing from you more in the BA community. So thanks again. And thanks
Thanks, John.
everybody for watching.
Thank you.